Okay, good afternoon. Oh, thank you so much for joining us in this visiting professor seminar by Professor Jorge DIAZ-CINTAS from the University College London. I'm so glad to see we have our MA students who are my former BA student in the subtitling class and the PhDs and the friend and colleagues from CUHK. Yeah, and it's a great pleasure for me to introduce Jorge as a academic mentor and friend, and who has always been some sort of a father figure to many early career, mid-career academics in audiovisual translation. I think for most of the audiences in this room, Jorge needs no introduction. So he is the founding member of Transmedia Research Group and the founding director of the Centras at UCL. And he is the author of numerous articles, which I pressed you to read in the past few years. And Jorge is a pioneer in audiovisual translation, is a frequent speaker at international conferences and events, and has offered consultancy services to the European Parliament, European Commission, UNA, Dulux, and Netflix, among others. He is the chief editor of New Trends in Translation Studies and the recipient of Jan Ivassen Awards by European Association for the Studies in Screen Translation.
Correct.
Impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the
Xenia
Xenia? Yeah,
Martinez.
I almost pronounced it as Xenia. Yeah. Xenia Martinez Award for the invaluable services to the field of audiovisual translation. Without further ado, let's give Jorge a warm welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Dingkun, for the lovely presentation. And thank you also very much to the University of Hong Kong for the invitation to be here as a research academic for a couple of weeks. As you might have heard earlier on, we were mentioning that it's not my first visit, it's my second visit to Hong Kong, but the first one, it was so short, I didn't even have time to go on the tramways. So this time I've already done that because everybody told me you have to get on those, on the ding-dings. So I'm already a proud user of the ding-dings. So I was tasked with giving a presentation a little bit general on audiovisual translation and communication in what we are, all involved or all immersed this global world that keeps changing quite radically and quite frequently, and sometimes has an impact on the way we do things in our area. I'm going to start with a little bit of a historical approach. And when film was invented more than 100 years ago, everybody hailed it as being, okay, that's it. With images, we can communicate. We don't need language. Is the Esperanto of communication. We can just produce them. And we did produce some films that went around the world without language, but not quite, because many of those will have what we know as intertitles. There were information written on the text that needed to be translated into other languages. And there was always usually a person in the cinema explaining to the audience what was happening and reading some of these texts in there. And they were used for many reasons, to tell us about the plot, sometimes to tell us about a characterization of the different speakers that you can see in there. Some of them were really well embedded, and they will be part of the creative intent of the original. And even at the time, because they were so important to go global in that period, there was the best Oscar that was given to the best intertitles. Yeah, and the person created those texts in there. It soon, however, proved that people wanted to hear things, that, bringing in sound was really an advancement to enjoyment and communication. And what we know as the talkies, which is the first films that they could talk, that they will have audio in there. The first one was the Jazz Singer, which wasn't really a talkie. It had a little bit of talking, but also intertitles because it was still very sort of new. The first really talkie film where everything was audio was The Lights of New York in 1928. And this opened a little bit the Pandora box. Now, they are speaking in English. How do we deal now to go around the world and make sure that people will enjoy these productions? The first thing that they came up with was with this idea of multilingual versions. And what we did, or they did at the time, was okay, we have the stage ready to do a film in English. So the actors come, they do their show in English, off they go, we leave the props, and then we bring in the Spanish team. The Spanish team do it in Spanish, in French, in German. There were a few languages that they did to go global. And again, that was in some cases, for instance, some of the actors, very famous at the time, they were from other countries and were bilingual. You know, Marlene Dietrich spoke German, Greta Garbo spoke Swedish, so they could do more than one language. And some people found it to their advantage. I don't know if you know, I've seen any films by Lauren and Hardy. What they were doing in many languages, they were reading flashcards that were phonetic. So when they were doing Spanish, they sounded even funnier because they were speaking Spanish with a very strong American accent or British accent in there. So that was a way that they were trying, and they were doing it in 4 or 5 languages themselves. They were never translated. They were speaking in Spanish, but in a very, very awkward Spanish that added to the humor or the slapstick productions that they were giving at that time. The problem was that people in many countries didn't want to see some of those new actors that they didn't know in Spanish. They wanted to see Greta Garbo. She was the one that everybody wants to see, not a Spanish actress that they wasn't known, and then she was speaking in Spanish. Yeah. So what we did was, okay, people continued investigating, and then they came up with subtitling. Yeah, and subtitling one was one of the first ones in 28. The Singing Fool was credited to be the first one ever in Denmark to come out with subtitles, and people needed to read. Now, if you are maybe in Denmark at the time, that probably was okay, but if you were in Spain, it wasn't okay because many people couldn't read. We had a very large illiterate population, and that wasn't really a way of catching on all those audiences. So people were doing things parallelly, and then they came up with this new approach, which was dubbing. So what I'm going to do is record the voices. You don't need to read, and then I will do a trick and blah, blah. We'll see a little bit later how that happens. But these are the first 2 ones that were produced, and ever since the early 20s, so nearly now 100 years later, we continue with these 2 main forms of audiovisual translation. We've added other things. Of course, cinema is the beginning, and it still continues to be there, the theatrical releases and so on, but we've seen quite a bit of an evolution. From there, we went through the VHS, if you remember what that was, some of you, which, you know, it was the first time that we were given the power to control the audiovisual production. Until then, you went, watch the telly. If you were late, you missed the beginning of the film. With your VHS, you could play it in the afternoon, in the morning, share it with somebody else, and you were a bit free. And then that was even more incrementally exploited through the DVD. It's still available these days and reincarnated in this Blu-ray. And then more we know. And as you can see in that evolution, it was virtually every decade we were moving and getting up something new. The DVD was the biggest breakthrough, and that allowed for us to have one version in the original, several versions in the subtitle version, and several versions also dubbed, which is what we are doing these days with the OTT providers, the streamers, the platforms, which are the famous ones. So there are the usual suspects, many of them from the USA, but there are many others that are probably not as well known, but also operating in many countries. And not only entertainment, because when we come to think about audiovisual translation, we always think about entertainment somehow, but there are also thematic places. Sports is becoming one of the new frontiers for entertainment. FIFA Plus, if you like football, for instance, FIFA Plus, they advertise themselves as the Disney's, as the Netflix of sports. And very recently, they were looking for translators who can do subtitles, but also know about sports. Yeah, because you need a new jargon and different things. So we're seeing quite a bit of changes there. And this is what we've been talking, and it's been theorized as the platform societies. You know, we are doing everything now through platforms. Everything is in the cloud. Everything is somewhere there. We've done away with products or produce that we can have in our hands. We don't have DVDs any longer. The day that IGG closed doors, we won't have productions to watch, or we won't have to go to ask someone who has got DVDs or Blu-rays or whatever. So we've gone now to the cloud for everything, including audiovisual communication and entertainment. And I would like to make a very big distinction here because, as I said, usually we consider audiovisual translation entertainment and we think about Squid Game or we think about big productions. But actually, there is a lot more that meets the eye. There is a lot of user generative products or audiovisual productions, Bilibili, YouTube, Vimeo. Until now, they've been sort of out of the equation. Now they're becoming very much part of the audiovisual landscape. And to give you an idea, for instance, Netflix has already employed some YouTubers, influencers, to produce productions or programs for Netflix that are going to be translated as if they were films or if they were other productions. But until now, we didn't have anything like that. And most of for once, I'm not going to be talking about artificial intelligence during the presentation. Maybe you've got questions we can discuss later, but I've left it out. But when you hear a lot about dubbing and artificial intelligence, it is not really with entertainment. It's mostly with user-generated media, yeah, which until now, it wasn't part of the business, yeah, and nothing was done there. I will mention a little bit, but as I said, it's not really what I wanted to do today here. So the industry itself, you can see here, this is the projection into the future just for OTT. OTT is a term I'm not sure you're familiar with, but it's equal to streaming or to video on demand, but it's very much used in the industry. And this is their projection into the future, which is, you can see, it's a very steep curve to the positive. And you can see, for instance, Netflix is the largest producer of, or the largest platform. It's got over 300 million subscribers, and they've changed the way we do translation as well. Not only the way we consume, which I leave it to other academics, but it has changed radically the way we do subtitles and we do dubbing. And that's why I find it important for us to know a bit what is it that they are doing. And very recently, they gave us the amount of money that they made last year during the first quarter of the year. And as you can see, most of the potential increase is outside of North America. Yeah, that's where the money could be made. And that only comes with translation. That only comes with bringing in new languages. And they are bringing in new things. I know that, for instance, the first Cantonese films and audio descriptions are already available in Netflix. So they're moving in languages that before they weren't there. But also, if you take a look at, for instance, platforms like YouTube, which is the second in the world, they don't say which one is the first one, but we know that the first one is Bilibili. And if you can see in here, these are people that create their videos. And the top one, I don't know if you know him. I didn't know him myself until not that long ago. Mr. Beast, he's got nearly 300 million followers. And they generate lots of money. But you can see that many of them are not even in English. There are in India. There are quite a few as well. And this is the untapped potential of audiovisual communication. Many of you are nodding. I know him. And now he's been translated into many languages, but until very recently he wasn't. And this is what the industry with companies are looking. Is there any mileage? Could we do something with this material that young people are watching? But not only you are watching that, sometimes what you're going to get as well is other videos, corporate videos that are going to be selling you things, marketing things, and they also tend to come with subtitles and translated into languages. So this is a very, very new area that very few people are investigating. And that brings this sort of paradox. There is a lot of consumption of audiovisual productions. The volumes are really big. The financial investment is very healthy. And yet there is virtually little research compared to other areas. It's increasing. Very few people are teaching or embracing audiovisual translation in their educational programs. I was recently in India, which is now these days the biggest country in the world in terms of population. They overtook China a while ago. And virtually nobody, no universities teach audiovisual translation. Yet their Bollywood is not even their biggest industry. They've got Tollywood, which is Telugu and Tamil, and they generate a lot more. And every film gets translated at least into 6 languages. And they were struggling. I was talking to a few companies and they said, well, we struggle. We don't have anyone. You know, no universities that are taking this. So we train some people to do the translation, but very little visibility in that. And so much so, it was a couple of years ago, you got there, the global streaming boom, all the likes of Netflix and so on, is creating a severe translation shortage. And many companies were complaining that they were struggling to find the right talent, the right translators to be working with their productions. And there were some initiatives in there, for instance, the pool, which is a free database where translators were encouraged to put their details so that companies could go and check, okay, I need a translator into Cantonese and I don't know anyone. If I go here, I can check, oh, I need subtitles or dubbing, or I need audio description or whatever, and then I can just retrieve information of someone that is in there. And also, quite a few companies got together to launch what is known as the AVT Pro certification, which I'm glad to say is also in Chinese, and there are quite a few colleagues here that have been working to make it possible to bring other languages into this. There are now 15 languages, and as I said, it's professional and instigated by companies so that they can tap into people like you that know the topic, that know how to work on this and can just hit the ground running when they need professionals working in this area. So what were we talking about when we talk about audiovisual texts? Why are they different to any other products? And why do we talk even about audiovisual translation? Isn't just translation if you know languages, and then you can do it. You've got there a definition, which I'm not going to be reading to you, but basically what we've got in audiovisual communication is an audio track, a visual track, and then within those, I've got lots of information. I've got sound, I've got music, I've got images, I've got language, and all that. And to make it even a bit more exciting for us is, as they say in English, moving images, moving text. It's moving all the time. So that means that my translation is going to have to be doing certain things there. This is what in multimodality is called the resource integration principle. It sounds, or it reads like a mouthful, but basically what it is anything in those elements, isolated, they don't mean anything. It's only when they are all together, integrated, that they mean something. And that's why if you translate dialogue without the visuals, your translation is doomed from the very beginning, because you're not going to be able, it doesn't make sense. If you read a text without the images and script, you sometimes don't make sense. What is going on? What are they saying? But you know what's happening. Yeah, and that's what we need. And that's why you need to bring in all the other things with the challenge that most likely you're not going to be able to change the visuals. So if something is happening in there, you'll have to find a translation that will help you. Think, and I'm not going to put you in this spot to give you and me a solution, but think of a film like this, and how are you going to translate this into simplified or traditional or Cantonese? And it's nice because nothing is happening. He's the baddie, and they are the goodies in the film. So far, so good for translation.
Well. Sorry.
And that's it. So, well, we know nothing happens by accident in film, so that's why he was sitting precisely on a well. And the other comes to make a joke, but it's not really a joke. Well, he realizes this is not funny. Sorry. What do you do as a translator? You know, in other places, you might do the big maxim is when in doubt, leave it out. Yeah, oh, I don't know, I'll leave it. Nobody's going to notice. But in here, if they're talking, you have to come up with something. You have to justify what is happening in there. You might be more or less funny. You might spend 1 or 2 nights without sleeping and thinking, how can I translate this? Can I find something in here? But this is one of the elements that is going to be challenging for us as translators. How do we do this? As I mentioned earlier on, there are 2 main approaches, but the field is been expanding and covering many other areas. So we've got what we traditionally call subtitling, but again, it's been changed. And now most companies will be talking about timed text. That's the way that Netflix started talking about subtitling, and now everybody's using that. So doesn't matter what I say. I guess if large corporations are using timed text as if it was subtitling, that's what it's going to be. And we do subtitles for films and things, but also for operas, theaters, live events, and they're called surtitles. Yeah? Then we do revoicing. Traditionally, we called it. You can get interpreters on the screen, usually for interviews that are happening live, but also dubbing. And traditionally, dubbing for everyone was lip syncing when they move and it seems that they are speaking your own language. Now, the term is a bit like revoicing. It's an umbrella term, and I've got many ways of doing it. You can do it with narration. I don't hear the original, and I simply revoice. Yeah, and a documentary, you don't see anyone, and then you can just get a popular voice in your country, and then they're going to be reading over the images. You don't see anything, you cannot compare to anything. Then you've got lip sync dubbing. I will tell you a little bit more, but basically, I am moving my lips, and then you're going to get someone, a voice talent, to make sure that it looks as if I'm speaking in Chinese or in French. Yeah, and you will believe that I am speaking in Chinese. It's a fantasy, but we'll believe it. Then we've got voiceover style dubbing. That is the one you hear a little bit, then the soundtrack goes down, and then you hear the translation. And then at the end, the translation finishes a bit earlier, and then you hear the soundtrack again. People say that it's more believable, that you can hear the original, and it's, you know, it's a truth translation, which is not really quite, but it gives you that feeling that because you hear the original, there is some more connection in the translation. The new one, it was called traditionally United Nations voiceover, because that was something that the United Nations, when they were doing videos, that's what they were doing. Yeah. But that one is disappearing in entertainment. And now what we're having is lector dubbing, mainly instigated again by Netflix. And this lector dubbing, I don't hear the original, but I know it's not in Chinese. And what I'm going to say is the person is moving the lips because the sound is eliminated, moving the lips, but then the translation, you can see it's not lip syncing, and you can see, well, it's not, it's moving the mouth in a different way. If you are in translation, at least for me, it's maddening because I look at the lips and I can see that they go in a different direction and they don't synchronize with anything, but some people like it and watch it. So that shows you that, you know, we are not a general audience when we're doing this, but this is the way is there. And then we've got something that I will mention later on a little bit, which is access services. Okay, sign language interpreting, perhaps the most traditional one, but then we've got as well subtitles for people who are deaf and hard of hearing, and then also audio description for people who are blind or partially sighted. And we'll see how it goes. Traditionally, we say that the world is being sort of divided between people that like subtitles and people that like dubbing. Yeah, that is challenged most frequently these days because these days, as a consumer of audiovisual productions, you get it all. Yeah, you will go to the platforms and you will have subtitles and dub versions and accessibility and everything. And that is the way we're getting there. So you're getting subtitles everywhere. And in many cases, like in the case of this part of the world, you want everything at the same time. Yeah, I don't know any other countries in the world that will have bilingual subtitles in the same way as they are done in China and in this part. Yeah. Where you have the original, when you have the translation into Chinese, and you tell me that you follow that information. I don't know who can have time in 2 seconds to read all that text, But when I ask my students that come to London, how do you watch audiovisual production? Bilingual subtitles. Can you read everything? Yeah. They want, you must be supermen and superwomen reading so much text. But this is something very unusual. When I tell other colleagues in Spain, in France, in Germany, they always find it amazing. How can you do that? But that is another way that we've got it. What do we get in the UK is something a bit like this.
I watch a lot of movies and TV. On the train, at home, at the movies, while working out, doing dishes, in the bath. But no matter where I'm watching, I find myself constantly doing this one thing.
I think it'll always be alright.
What?
I think it'll always be alright. I think it'll always be alright. I think it'll always be alright.
So that is apparently, and according to a study by the BBC, younger generations watch their programs always with subtitles. It's more than people who are deaf or hard of hearing. Those are the biggest consumers are the younger populations, the younger people in our societies. And that is why some companies are just doing subtitles for everything that they produce, and social media are incorporated more and more subtitles because they know that young people like those ones. When we're talking about dubbing, as I mentioned earlier on, remember I'm using now the term as Netflix and the industry is using it. So it's everything that is changing the voice, okay? And you've got in there, the most challenging one is lip sync dubbing because we usually go for 3 synchronies. So we need to make sure that the lip sync is appropriate, but also that the sentence is not too long. Because if somebody closes the mouth and you continue hearing, it's not the person. And if somebody appears on the screen and then you can hear, oh yes, it's nice, then you're not going to believe it either. So you need to make sure that what you're seeing and the way they're speaking sort of goes there, sounds natural. Yeah. So those are the challenges in there. And the other ones fall in between. Sometimes I don't take care of the lip syncing, so I don't care if the translation is too long because I do a voiceover or whatever. But there are many ways of doing this in that way. Now, what we're finding now, remember, subtitles everywhere. And YouTube, MIT, Google, they've been doing automated subtitles since 2004. So it's been many, many years that they've been always producing subtitles. But now the flavor of the month is not just subtitles because they've been there for a long time, is dubbing. Dubbing generally, revoicing, changing the voices. And now you've got, for instance, Mr. Beast. It was one of the first ones chosen by YouTube to do automated or to do dubbed versions of his productions. Yeah, and this one, Mr. Beast, adopted a hybrid approach, which was, okay, I'm going to allow translations because until now I've only done English with the contribution of humans. Yeah, so there's a bit of machine translation, post-editing, and now it's very simple. You go to YouTube, you just go to any of the videos by Mr. Beast, you go to the audio, and then you got a menu, I think it's 15 languages that you can switch on, and then you get the audio in those languages of all his productions. Remember, 300 million followers, nearly, that he has got. So there's a lot of potential in there. There is also what YouTube did was choose a few YouTube channels that they felt were well watched and then do automated dubbing without human intervention. The results were not very good. There is an article by one of my colleagues in London, Rocío Baños, and she was looking at some of the outcomes which were a bit not very good and certainly not commercial or viable for really communication purposes. But YouTube still continues to be adamant that they want to go down this route with more audio in translation. And it was only in December, so less than a year now, a few months only, that they opened the AI dubbing, which is when you upload a video, whether you like it or not, they're going to do automatically add the dubbed audio. Yeah. And they know that it's not good enough. So they gave us a disclaimer. And the disclaimer comes to say that basically, if you do it, The translation may or might contain errors. It's not that might contain errors. It does contain errors, many errors. And actually, mispronunciations, accents, dialects, background noise, proper nouns, idioms, jargon, basically senseless, what you get sometimes. Yeah, but they are telling you there. Other issues may be that the sound recognition is not good enough, and then the synchrony is going to be all over the shop. You know, they're going to be moving the mouth and you don't hear anything, and then someone talks later on. And then what they say is maybe you, the creator of the video, or someone who speaks the target language can review the dubs before publication. Now, to me, this is a serious sort of challenge. You know, I'm doing my video and YouTube is giving me all the challenges. Okay, now go and check the translation into Turkish. Well, do I know Turkish? Do I need to find someone to do it for me? How is it going to be? Am I going to be looking stupid in Turkish and people are going to get off watching me? I don't know. So all these ethical issues that the large corporations are bringing into this with this artificial intelligence, the buzzword that everyone wants to use, without proper discussion and knowing how that can affect translation, communication, and the distribution of those productions. I'll move now swiftly to accessibility. Remember, we said sign language, subtitles for people who are deaf and hard of hearing, and audio description. And I think if we see them, is the easiest way. We've been fighting for a long time for subtitles that represent information that deaf people cannot hear. And basically, who is talking? So you can move your subtitles and you know who is saying what by displacing them, changing colors or whatever. If there is a car chase, what's happening? What noises are there? So I will tell you, the guy seems to be saying with pleasure, but it's not, because he's speaking with an accent like me. Yeah, his accent is French, mine is Spanish, so I indicate, okay, read it as if he's speaking with an accent, or music. What is happening with the music? This is a song, I'll tell you because you cannot hear it. Sometimes we probably go a little bit too far, and I like tennis, for instance. I don't think that's gonna help me if I am deaf. The whole bloody program there, like tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. So really, I can see the ball that is going to places. And if you think that we all cry the same way, think again, apparently Spanish people, we cry differently. And you need to just make it known in there. For audio description, I'll play you a little bit clip here. I'm sure you're probably more familiar with
Watch a movie
this.
and close your eyes, and you can't follow most movies with just listening. You'd be like, who's that? What's going on?
Police lights flash on the front of the buyer's house as Officer Callahan stands outside with Joyce and Jonathan.
Audio description is a description of the action that's going on in between the dialogue.
Inside the dark house, Hopper walks down the hallway with a flashlight.
For blind people, having that audio description, it becomes their eyes.
I definitely say Orange is the New Black, Stranger Things and Game of Thrones have been my audio description highlights.
11 closes her eyes. Elsewhere in the lab, the man from the photo sits at a table with a piece of paper.
I can't see anything at all. So actually, I've never had audio description on life, as it were. So having it on TV is a great start.
I use it for watching TV programs, for films at home, films in the cinema.
Theatre and cinema are my favourites.
I use audio description when I go to football matches.
A lot of those little subtleties in the way a person looks or something they do with their hands is actually a massive part of the story.
11 steps out wearing the dress and wig. Lucas gives Dustin an impressed look as Mike gawks at her.
If it's a gentle film, they'll have perhaps a gentler voice.
Blinks, tilting his head.
And in the action films, they'll have a harder edge description.
It drags dried growth and a piece of shepherd's suit across the floor, leaving behind a trail of blood.
All that tension, a lot of that is based in seeing what's happening and getting a sense of the atmosphere, and that's really brought to life as well by audio description.
I don't watch anything without audio description.
I'm an absolute addict of audio description. I OD on AD.
For more information, call the RNIB
That is
helpline.
a film, a little commercial from the Royal National Institute of the Blind, who have been working on this type of access services for people who are blind and also want to enjoy audiovisual productions. Basically, when you work in audio description, what you do is tell the viewers, the consumers of those productions, who does what, to whom, how, where, and when. But you don't explain. You don't say the why. And this is one of the challenges. Where did you stay that you are objective without adding the subjectivity that we all bring with ourselves? You know, by the use of certain terms, you're showing your subjectivity. Are the characters black, white? Do you need to tell? Gender, sexuality, the way they dressed up. So it can become very, very challenging and very sensitive in the way you present the information. And I know that next week we're going to have some very exciting presentations by people on the topic of audio description. Hong Kong, for a long time, has been at the front, leading front of audio description. When even in mainland China, there was virtually nothing done in audio description. In Hong Kong, you were already doing lots of that for your community. So I'm really looking forward to that. Most of this is happening in the world because it's duty of care. We need to care for societies that are inclusive. And actually, it is largely legislated. The United Nations, in their Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, they actually mention in Article 9 that we need to be inclusive societies. It's not just entertainment, it's communication. You know, we have videos for a fire. If I can see a video that is a fire and you don't tell me anything and I am blind, what do I do? Am I scared and run away? Where? And what sort of information do I need to get? So they make it very clear that we need to make sure that all this information is accessible through audio description, subtitles, and sign language. In Europe, the European Union, we've got a directive, is the biggest legislation. Every single country that belongs to the European Union have to apply it in their country. Yeah? And again, making sure that accessibility is present in our screens. At national level, you also get different corporations, and then you've got in China as well, the ABTD, which is also looking at things like this. And then traditionally, the legislation was only for broadcasters, television stations. But now it's changed. And then also the OTT corporations need to be inclusive, need to incorporate. And that's why we've got, there is this little project in Spain. It's called MAP, Media Accessibility Platform. And you can see there how the countries fare in the terms of accessibility. The darker the green, the more legislation and guidance. And you can see there in the part of China, it's not too dark, the green, but there are things done in this field. And then, you can see there is a very interesting document that it was a report on the presence of languages in some of the biggest platforms. Amazon, it was looking only at Western platforms, so Amazon Prime and Disney. And you can see the one that interests me is this area that I think is bound to increase the presence on the screens, which is audio description. You can see that still most of the companies are not doing enough. They're only doing 10%, 12%, and that is all of them together. If you split them according to which ones they are, the one doing most is Netflix, which is the one leading this sort of change. Disney and Amazon Prime, very, very little. And if you look then more into detail of languages, you can see in here that English, the first one there, is the one that, lots of the description is done. But you do get as well, Mandarin and Cantonese are also making a little bit of an appearance in these platforms. So again, if you're interested in this field, I will, suggest that you also look into the possibilities of these new areas that haven't been explored that much in our field. How is the industry in here? Moving is another area that I want to discuss, is we've got other voices. Traditionally, and particularly in my part of the world, Spain, the UK, we were consuming all the time North American productions or English productions. Everything was done from English into other languages, but it was with Parasite that it became a sort of pivotal change. And then we discovered that actually outside of Europe and the USA, there are other cinema productions, and they produce things that actually could be well received in other countries. And ever since, you've got the large corporations investing a lot of money on productions that come in other languages and from other parts of the world. Now, that clearly links with soft power. And we've been a little bit sort of, the Americans particularly have been very clever on how they use that soft power to just make sure that some of the kids in my country that don't play baseball, they walk around with a baseball cap. Yeah, and we dressed up in ways that, well, really? I said, from Spain, or should it be in Chicago by the way it looks? So that's been, you don't notice, but it's been one of the things that has been around. I've spoken or I've written about this in the particular case of China, and how this Belt and Road policy of going out has been having quite a bit of impact, particularly in Africa, where Star Times is an OTT as well from China, and they've been translated into lots of languages, African languages, to make their presence better known there. So it comes along with all the investments, but also the entertainment and the presence of Chinese communities and so on. This, of course, has got the potential, as you can see here, of change the way we perceive other cultures. In fact, we're already noticing, for instance, in the UK, in the USA, Spanish is becoming very popular because of the platforms and Netflix that are in Spanish, and they're very, very popular. But also, we've seen in the UK, many more students learning Japanese and Korean out of the blue, not out of the blue. That's because they've been listening to Korean pop, watching K-drama and things like that. But this is having quite a lot of impact. If you are in London these days and you want to go to a Korean restaurant, you have to book in advance, well in advance, because they are the most popular ones these days. Yeah. So this is what, through translation, it has the potential of becoming a lot more financially and so on. So we've got more films, more productions, greater volumes. So that means that we need more translation. And fine, from English into other languages, that's easy. We all speak English. The world speaks English. But what happens from other languages into English? Now I've got this Cantonese film or this Japanese film that I need to translate into English. How many English speakers are there that are fluent in Cantonese or in Japanese or in other languages? And what we're trying to do now, what we're doing is asking the native speakers, can you please translate into English? Because we don't have enough people that speak enough English speakers that speak Cantonese fluently to understand what is going on. And even worse, how do I translate Korean or Turkish into Spanish or into Estonian or into Italian? Because we only teach English, French, German, but in the schools, in the universities, we don't. So how do we resolve this? Because we know that more and more, and the companies are investing a lot more in all these productions. So we resort to what is known as pivot translation. So imagine I've got a Squid Game, Korean. And then what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to translate into English. And then once I've got it in English, I've got a rough translation into English, then I can do the dubbing into numerous languages. I'm going to be using the English and do the dub, the lip syncing into Spanish. What I'm going to do as well is I'm going to use it to do subtitles from the English. But I'm also going to use it to do English subtitles, because that's a rough translation, so I need to modify a little bit. And something that didn't exist a few years back, I'm going to do the dubbed version in English. Yeah, the Americans, the British, they never consume other productions from other countries. The little bit that they did was always with subtitles. Now everything gets dubbed into English. So we get lots of shows, lots of films that, you know, are dubbed, and we don't have the professionals because we've never ever taught dubbing into English. So that's very, very new. And this is what it looks like. We're working a lot with Excel files. So you got there the time codes and everything, and then you've got the source who is speaking. I've got the dialogue in there in English, and then annotations, okay? And then I've got annotations, and that's easy because it's English. I can hear and blah, blah. But what happens if what I've got is Korean? So I've got my Korean text. What I'm going to do is a translation, which is very close to the Korean, maybe even sometimes not even natural. And then I'm going to add annotations to tell you, okay, this is the English. But actually in Korean, what they're saying is blah, 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 blah. Because maybe in Spanish you can find another solution, or maybe the English is not very transparent in what is happening in here. Now, the challenge, of course, is before everything was in English. But now that things are not in English, they are in English because we're using English as a pivot language. Yeah? And then what I get in here, for instance, parasites. I don't know if you've seen the film, but in Parasites, they are working class in Seoul. And then at one stage, the father says, oh, I didn't realize that in Seoul National University, they were doing fakes, forgeries, because the daughter has come with a fake document. Now, working class family in Seoul, talking about Seoul National University, yeah, makes sense. What do you get in the English subtitles? So this Seoul National University becomes Oxford. Really? Now, I live in the UK, not far from Oxford, actually, in London. And I only just start thinking, really? In that house, do they have money to pay for international fees? And are they going to be given the opportunity and blah, blah, blah? So my suspension of disbelief is taken away. Because how can they reference Oxford there? But hey, that is the English subtitles. And if that is the way that they want to consume them in the UK or in the USA, who am I to tell them off? That's the way they're doing it. But my problem begins when I watch this film in Spanish, and then they also end up in Oxford. And that's when I think, oh, that's not fair. Because maybe I don't want to use the Oxford in Spanish, and maybe I want to do it differently. But what I'm doing now is going through English and the culture of English. And this is Oxford reference. It could be sexual references, political references. It could be anything. It could be humor or anything. And when you know, why did he put Oxford? So they ask him, because it's such a weird solution in a film like that. So the English translator explained, well, you know, when I was young, I wanted to do my degree, my studies at Harvard University, but they didn't want me there. So I decided I'm not going to give them credit in the film. I'll do Oxford. Yeah, so that was a very personal decision. But now the rest of the world are consuming it because what the translator thought at the time. So I'm wrapping up now. The time has come here. And what can I see in my crystal ball? That everything is changing. I didn't even mention artificial intelligence in depth, but we know that it's going to be more and more work to be done. The volumes are not going to stop. For instance, Netflix comes up every day, 4 or 5 new shows every day. Yeah, so that is the type of volume that we have. And if we are now bringing all these people from social media and so on, some companies are already working on those, that again, the volume is going to be there. So it's not just films, it's not TV series, it's a lot more in there. And we are going to need more specialization sometimes. You know how to do subtitles, fine. But do you know about medicine? Because this is an educational video for medical sciences. And I know a bit more. But that is normal. We do it in other translations. You don't study translation. You do medical translation, scientific translation, blah, blah. So it's just a sort of calc or copying what we do in other areas. We are going to go beyond Hollywood. You know, Hollywood is not here to be the big thing, even though some presidents in far afield countries want to change and want to put all these tariffs of 100% to foreign films and blah, blah, blah. I think the rest of the world has discovered that actually some Chinese films or Korean films are really good as well, and we want to watch them in other countries. So we're going to have there, and I'm afraid in here that pivot translation is going to stay, because it's going to be challenging to translate into all those languages unless we change our educational programs and we work with other languages that are not so present. My mom in Spain, she's 85, and she's in love with Turkish soap operas. Every day she's working Turkish soap operas. But we don't have a Turkish population in Spain. So how do you translate from Turkish into Spanish? And there are, I don't know if you're familiar with those soap operas, they last forever. It's not just one episode or 100. They can be hundreds of episodes, and they need to be translated and so on. So it's more and more that is going to be in there. What we are doing as well, we're seeing is automation. We never had automation in audiovisual translation. Why do you want to use machine translation for a film? Doesn't make sense. And it doesn't make sense till this day. But if you've got a Turkish soap opera with 100 episodes, then you can, if anything, for consistency. What these guys say in episode number 10, which is now episode 250, and it's probably a recurrent sentence. So that might help me. Or if I am working with many people, so if I've got 5 translators for those series, maybe then you've got a consistency approach here, and then you make sure that all the 5 translators are using the same terms for particular original terms that we find in there. And then with artificial intelligence, of course, we need to know what is going on. Otherwise, they will do things without our knowledge. But I think my main concern will be that there is no language parity now. You know, everything is in English, lots of things. If you go to other languages, not so much. And there is not much you can do. I talk to people in Greece, in Iceland, and them, oh, no fear. Artificial intelligence, there is nothing. You know, very little, and whatever little is really bad because we haven't put the effort. But that's a risk for minority languages that they're not going to be up to speed. And then all the ethical implications we know about gender bias. It's always masculine results and things like that. But also what we saw, YouTube taking decisions for us and then putting the onus on me that I have to do the revisions and everything. But shouldn't you do it yourself, not just getting it on me? So those are the things that I guess we need to be alert when we're looking into the future. And with that, I will say I'm going for your presentation, for your attention, sorry. And if you've got any questions, I'll be happy to answer anything. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Jorge. So let's open the floor for your questions. Jerry.
Maybe if my memory serves me well, the line in Parasite about Oxford University, it's actually a hypothesis because I think the plot is that the daughter was making some fake documents, certificates to try to get a job with a wealthy family.
Yeah.
And the father saw that and he was impressed by the product. And he said something like, if the Seoul National University had a program in fake
Yes.
certificate production, then you would definitely get a distinction, something like that. And so I think in that sense, if you are thinking about an epitome of a famous university and the fact that it has been changed to Oxford University, because that line sounds like a mistranslation to me if I just read that line. So it seems to be more acceptable if it's a hypothesis, as I've mentioned.
I would agree with you. My only challenge is, or my only doubt there is, only the British universities are the best in the world? Why is not Peking University? Or why is not Fudan? Or why is not Hong Kong University? And that is, again, it's just that this remit to go always to the Anglo-Saxon world. That's my challenge in here, because it's the cultural reference. Fine, we are in the Southeast Asia. Why don't you go, okay, Seoul University is not very well known. The translator said it's very long. Okay, but he says, wow. Well, I don't need the wow. I can see things like that. So maybe I can allow for more. But maybe I could resort to other cultural geographies. And again, the idea that is a good university. There are many good universities in this part of the world. But I think, and his selection was very reduced. It was Harvard, Oxford, you know, as if nobody else has. And that is what my challenge is. I don't mind doing it. And yes, of course, Oxford is going to be known by many people. But I think it's still reiterating when Parasite is trying to break away from all that and bringing us to a new culture and a new place, it's still on the margins. There's, oh, but, you know, when you're talking about a good university, come to Oxford, Cambridge, or Harvard and so on. And that is why my challenge is in there. And I know, you know, that was his decision, and I'm not criticizing the decision as a bad one. It's just, in my case, is that dissonance with what I'm seeing, what I'm watching. And always the reiteration that the Western is better, or somehow the Western is the reference for anything that they want to do. That was my thing, but it's a very personal decision as well. I share it with some colleagues. I know I've got a colleague from Warsaw. She's even more corrosive than me when she comes to this exercise or this example. But I think it is, you know, it's breaking away from that sort of bigger idea of what is good or what is, you know, the base, you know, our references, cultural references.
Thank you.
May I just chip in a little bit, follow up Sharon's question? Actually, this is just a remark. So for the Parasite, I have to bring this up in this translation studies seminar. So the subtitler actually was so loved and welcomed in Korea, and many experts from Korean studies, especially for film studies, they love his translation. And they were so puzzled. I brought up this issue about Oxford and Seoul National University. So this kind of issue never came to their attention at all. So And luckily, the person who informed me about this, their own puzzlement, will join Media for next week.
Okay.
Maybe we can give a very good persuasion.
And then see, yeah. But I think it's one of those, again, we tend to be, perhaps in translation, we have this interdisciplinary nature. You cannot be a translator if you know about something else, whether it is film, whether it is medicine, whether it is literature. In other disciplines, it's not really quite the same sometimes. And then when they're doing film studies, they never think about the translation. And you say, well, I talk to people in Spain, you cannot know any American films unless you've watched them with translation, and you are consuming the translation. And sometimes they will quote, but when she says the translation, not the original, because many of them, at least in my country, I know in other countries they might be much more fluent in English, but in many countries they're not that fluent in English, never mind Japanese, Russian, Chinese, or whatever other languages. But again, it's always, they are talking about those films that have been translated and they've used the translation, but they never come to think about the translation. Very few. And if they do, it's either critical, oh, the translation is really bad, or yes, the translation is good, but no examples. Why do they think it's good? Yeah. And this is something that still we need to probably fight a bit more to be better visibility or more dialogue with film studies. And I think that's one thing that I like for the conference next week, that it brings together people from also film studies and other areas that seem like a sort of natural allies. We're working with the same productions and so on, with the same sort of concepts many times. But yes, they don't really go farther down there. And sometimes the reverse, we don't go higher up. We just stay on the language and we don't see the bigger picture, so to speak. But yeah. Uh-huh. Bilingual? No, in China. All my students come from China mostly. I have a few students from Hong Kong. Most of them are from China, mainland China. And actually, as far as I can tell, or they tell me, some of the TV stations, Chinese TV stations, they're using bilingual subtitles because otherwise the kids don't watch those TV programs. I do ask them, why do you do that? And they always say, well, I always, sometimes they don't even think about it, but if they have to think about it, it's language learning. I don't know if it goes beyond language learning, and I want to see, are the subtitles giving me the wrong information? Are they being manipulated? But they never tell me that. I probably I think a bit too much, but I think sometimes maybe having, okay, what is it that they are saying? And what am I reading in the subtitles? And as far as I can understand, some people will comment. If you use Danmu, I guess Danmu is also very popular here, and they will comment. And, oh, yeah, well, that's, the translation in between the Chinese and the English is not quite what it seems, blah, blah, blah. So they use it as a sort of way of communicating and avoiding certain terms, sexual terms that become something else with numbers so that the censor things won't see it. But my understanding is that it's very well spread.
Hello. Hello. Hi. Can I make a suggestion?
Hold on. Yes. Could we have there is a question here in the audience, so in the room, and then we will open the floor for you as well.
Yeah, mine was a reply to what you are talking about for bilingual subtitles.
Yes, but the gentleman is finishing, and then we will
Yeah, sure.
mic to you. Thank you. Sorry, they're now switching on the mic. Mm. I'm not familiar with Hong Kong in that sense. But as I said, my students, they will be watching is not for people who don't understand the language. It is because they want to reconfirm things and they want to say things. Yeah. And then, but they will be talking about that with other software or other applications, which is called Danmu. And Danmu will allow you to communicate with peers through the computers, and you can write on top of the screen. And that's when they are communicating. Sorry, whoever was trying to talk, you can now chip in.
Sorry, I'm connected from home. I gather you were talking about bilingual subtitles in mainland Chinese programs. I'm not a native Chinese speaker, but I've been watching Chinese programs for a while. Sometimes you can find some of these twice subtitled, so to speak, programs on YouTube as well. And they have both lines of subtitles encoded in them. So I guess they are the official version, so to speak. And I think, I'm not sure about native speakers in mainland China. I'm sure there is a learning value, but I also think that there is a big difference between the English and the Chinese subtitles, because the Chinese subtitles are usually verbatim, they're word by word, so you can find everything of the dialogue there. Whereas the English subtitles are manipulated, of course. So, I mean, we have the power to stop the program and read everything if it's too fast for us. And that's certainly one thing we do all the time. But also, it's a way to say different versions, even if usually the translation is accurate, even if it's not very professional. So it doesn't look so much about censorship or pudor. It looks more like it's a matter of having different versions of the same dialogue, and also to keep the original so that you can refer to what they're actually saying.
Thank you, Anna. I didn't realize it was you. Now I can see your name in here. Thank you for the clarification. And then we've got a hand raised by Lawson Shanse.
Yes. Can I be heard?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Cintas, for your informative and enlightening talk. So I got two questions, which is related to the topic you mentioned in the lecture. So the first one is about the definition of subtitles and its subcategories, because as you mentioned, in different countries, the subtitles play different roles. So generally, we can see that in many countries like the US, UK, and some other European countries, and especially Japan, are using the subtitles in TV stations or TV programs as an accessibility tool, which is, well, it seems to be a little bit dull, and it is used to to convey information to all the citizens. But on the contrary, we can witness another type of subtitles, which is generally created by Chinese fan sub groups, Japanese YouTube video uploaders, and some other Korean some Korean TV shows. So these kind of subtitles are more stylistics and include some more customized translations. So do you think that these subtitles should be kind of put into diverged routes in the research, in our future research, or should they be classified as the whole as subtitles in future research?
Okay. I've tried. It's a very interesting observation, and it brings us to a very sort of theoretical angle. What do we call subtitles, and how can we make distinctions? We've been talking about subtitles that are bilingual, Chinese, English. In many countries, that's not bilingual. Bilingual is the film is in English, and then they've got French and German in there. We've got fan subbers that produce subtitles that sometimes are very different to what other people do with annotations and so on. Then you've got subtitles that are produced by for deaf people and so on. So it's very, very challenging. I've tried to come up with a term which I coined like cyber subtitling, which the common thread seems to be more the digital world, and then that opens the door to anyone who wants to contribute to do subtitles. In my experience, or in my opinion, I think, I think we know what we're talking about, and as long as we are clear in how we define and how we approach it, coming with many definitions or separating areas of research, I think is not really in our benefit. And I've always been very open to just discuss all types of subtitles, not just the ones that are done commercially or the ones that are done by the television, but also the ones that are done by people who are motivated enough to do subtitles. You were mentioning lots of people in many countries for different reasons, whether it is political reasons, whether it is engagement, whether it is fandom, whether it is affect because they like the anime and so on. So I personally will leave the field open enough to carry research in all these areas. And we can see, as I mentioned earlier, there's been this hybridization. Some of these fan subbers or just these YouTubers are now coming into the mainstream of some large corporations. We don't know if it's going to be a trend into the future, and many more are going to come. And maybe they will have an impact on commercial subtitles because they are being used to do other types of subtitles, or whether they will lose their creativity to be much more commercial. But I think it's a debate that we should leave open as much as possible. And of course, yeah, try to research and see how those things are changing and how they are impinging on our communication and our understanding of the audiovisual productions.
Well, thank you. I think, yes, maybe we should be more open to this topic. There's another question which is related to the audio description. So I just attended the APTIF several days ago in HKBU, and one of the presenters showed us the development of AD industry in Hong Kong. But as we all know that the subtitles is not only an aid for those who have hearing diseases or hard of hearing, but also serves for those physically healthy people. But on the other hand, the audio description is primarily only for those who have maybe who are blind or who have the visual impairments. So the difference in the scope of the group they serve could potentially limit the scope of the development of these industries and the research of these industries. So do you find, do you have any kind of considerations of how the AD would develop in the future, or if the intervention of AI would facilitate those audio describers to how to promote their work more fluently and smoothly and produce as many as they could to those who have the visual impairments?
Yeah. If I understood you correctly, there is, of course, the target audience is different, and the subtitles who are meant to be for deaf and hard of hearing people can be used for many other people, learners of the language and so on. So their social remit, quantitatively speaking, is wider. And that is actually reflected in legislation. In some countries, or in many countries, you will have legislation that tells you 100% subtitles or 80% subtitles. Whereas when it comes to audio description, and it's meant to be for a smaller audience, then they will have margins of 20%. So you can see that the governments realize that there is a different approach and different audiences, and they will manipulate their targets. Having said that, audio description is not just simply for blind people. There are some experiments that have been taken with neurodivergent people. People, for instance, autistic people, people on the spectrum might find it, and this is the research that is being carried out, that they might find it useful to know how emotions are described, how people are behaving on the screen, because that's one of the challenges in their daily lives is how they communicate to other people. So this type of approach might help them. And for some people, I don't do it myself, but I've got some colleagues, you might think that they're a bit peculiar, that love watching their films if they are driving. And when they are driving, what they do is use the audio description. And then with the audio description, they can be driving and they can be following the films as you can follow your books with audio guides. So there is a bit more of a spectrum there. But yes, it's clearly an imbalance in the number of people that they're going to be approaching. And the second half was whether artificial intelligence of new technologies could help boost audio description. And yes, it could. There are some applications now that you can get applications that will read images. So you give it an image, and then it will give you a description of that image, yeah, rather than just reading text. So that will be a step in the right direction. What you could also do is, if you've got the audio description, we saw, for instance, in the graph about Netflix, lots of audio description in English. But you could easily, or I think it's easy, but you might think it's a bit more complicated, but you could translate those audio descriptions that are in English into Chinese, Cantonese, Japanese, or whatever. You could use synthetic voices, and then you could provide those audio descriptions to your audiences. So the potential is there. Now, would people like to be listening to synthetic voices? Will people like to be reading films the American way, because the audio description is in English and is a way of watching at things, or not? But that is, again, research, and on the reception front, we haven't done that much. There is a lot of research that could be done with blind communities and testing whether those things will work or maybe not, and then see whether we could move forward. But I think there is a lot of potential there. I recently supervised a PhD, an MA dissertation, Japanese student, looking precisely and as translating from English, or looking at audio descriptions of anime in English and directly in Japanese. And the difference were really big, because in English, they weren't taking into consideration some of the essential elements of anime, because it's a different genre. So it might be some risks there, but maybe not for American films or for any other type of films, the same way that we translate the dialogue. So the potential is there, and the technology, not sure whether just only artificial intelligence, but technology in general is there to help us scale up and give a wider opportunity for blind people.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think it clarifies something, and I believe that such a kind of labor-intensive work, the audio description could be could be less labor-intensive with the help of technology. Thank you. Thank you for your
Thank you very much for your questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lawson. May I draw the attention back to this room? Catherine, do you have any question?
Sometimes, the access service is done for a particular sector of the population in mind, without realizing that many other people can also enjoy and exploit that sort of information and service. And it's little by little, but I do think that, that's the way legislation is going in many countries as well.
Professor Diaz, thank you for your lecture. It's like really inspiring. And I have this question is, so in traditional like subtitling practice, especially like in China or Hong Kong, that people are getting used to to have this bilingual subtitling. Some people, when there are some like mistakes, or there's some biased opinion when they're translating this kind of sensitive topics like gendered or ethical, these stereotypes. So there would be some criticism, and you just mentioned like this kind of communication. But I'm wondering, like as you said, AI dubbing is just started last year. So also, and you just said that AI dubbing, AI would also be used for audio description maybe. So what if in this kind of artificial intelligence, when their translation or dubbing, especially dubbing for those people who does not probably they don't know the original language. So what if in the process there are some problems like similar to this kind of stereotypes about? So do you think it will lead some problem, or like who can we blame to?
It's not if it could happen, it does happen. And we do know that artificial intelligence is based on things that existed and they've just stolen from many of us. If you have ever written an article or a book, chances are that you weren't asked and then they used it to train their systems. So the way the systems are being trained is with material that we know historically was sexist, racist, homophobic, and so on. So if you train the machine with that, what you're going to get is the same. Sexist, homophobic, and blah, blah. And we know that that is happening. Now, people are working now on ethical AI and undoing those biases. But I don't really know how far they've gone. When I've got my mobile, and if I write a name, start writing a name, Anthony, it will finish in masculine. You will never think that it could be a woman, which finishes with an A. The first one that I get is always a man, whichever name I try in Spanish. Yeah, and he's just thinking, well, it has to be a man. Well, the population is, we've got more women than men in Spain. So it should first woman, and then give me the man. But no, it's just the man, the first that coming. So we know that that is going to be there, and we need to be careful. Another area that you could think, you know, I've got a colleague of mine, he's working a lot in crisis translation. Imagine there is an earthquake in a country in Africa, and then you need, all the people are coming from around the world to help. Nobody speaks the language of that community. How do you communicate? You give them written papers that they're not going to read when they don't have anything. You can send them messages. If they're written, they probably don't know how to read them because their language is not written. You might send them voice. But if you send something that is done automatically, are you going to tell them to jump on the water when the message should be get out of the water? Or what are you going to tell them? And that is the risk. They tell us, yeah, but imagine we could do it quickly and it will be done. Yes, but is it going to be ethical? Are we going to be checking how it's done? How can we do it ethically? The technology is there, but it's how do we use it? And that is what I think is one of the main challenges. Is, you know, you can do it. I don't know what I was doing the other day with all this artificial intelligence and blah, blah, and then they couldn't resolve something that was very easy. Well, really, with artificial intelligence, and you're asking me to do this? You know, that should be resolved very easily. The technology is, but then you've got the humans in between. And then sometimes we're not as good as we would like to. So I think that is one of the most challenging propositions that we've got into the future. That you can do it, and particularly if you come from a given sector of the population. In your case, you're going to have it more challenging than if you were a male person. Because for a male, it's okay, it's all masculine, it's all good. But if you are black, if you're a woman, if you are gay, then maybe, yes, the solutions are not going to be the ones that are going to be favoring you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I think there might be some online questions in the chat box.
Sure, yeah, I don't want to touch anything or close anyone. Oh, okay. Yes. Okay. Hi, Anna. I'm not sure if you're still there.
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Yeah, she was a student of mine, and we've known each other for a while. I don't really know off the top of my head whether there is any research conducted on collective subtitling. I know there is a bit of research done on activism, and sometimes they move into subtitling, but I don't really know of anyone working on that on a systematic way. We do have, for instance, at UCL, quite a few students who have been working for their MA dissertations. I guess because many of them are engaged, whether there is quite a few women working with women issues and programs and so on. gay people as well, because there are special gay channels where they distribute information that otherwise might not be distributed and so on. But I don't really know. I can think about it. If not, you can send me a message as well, an email, and I will think whether there is any team of researchers that are working in that field. But I think it's a very interesting one. And in my mind, there is no doubt that this is going to have an impact on, commercial subtitling and the way, because it's the younger generations that are using that. And when they become older, they will be watching similarly, and it will have an impact.
Thank you very much. I will take you up on your offer.
Thank you for the questions. Yes, the PowerPoint, I'm going to leave it behind, but if you want to send me an email, I'll share it with you directly. And anybody that is listening to us now, if you want a copy, please just write to me and I'll send you a copy, but I'm going to leave a copy here as well. And I think it's going to be recorded, the whole presentation as well, if you want to watch it later.
Yeah. Can we take one more question from the room?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyone?
Or can I ask one more question?
Sure, yeah.
I'm sorry, like this question is from one of my friend online in the meeting.
Okay, yes.
Can I ask the question for him?
Of course.
So his question is, France banned the use of English gaming jargon by government workers in June 2022, caused the Ministry of Culture from the sector to be rife with language that could act as a barrier to understanding for non-gamers. So he was wondering, for the localization of video game remix or video clips, how could we preserve this kind of culture issues from happening? Or is there any possibility for us to build a kind of industry standard to help and instruct the job of the AVT translator?
Oof, that is a big task and very daunting. I'm not really very much into video games, even though I have supervised quite a few PhD students, but I actually did supervise them because I didn't know anything and I wanted to learn about video games. There is a very interesting PhD. If you are interested in more details, I can write to me and I'll share the details of that PhD. But it's precisely on the jargon that is used by video gamers, and how sometimes they clash with the translation. The translation is done commercially, sometimes not really by people that are as fans of the video game as you might be of that video game. Sometimes, for instance, the use of this PhD was in French, video gamers in France, and French is very strict in the use of Anglicisms. So the video game was pretty free of any Anglicisms, whereas all the video gamers of that video game, of that MOOC, they were actually using lots of English when they were communicating. So when they saw the French, they didn't even know what he was referring to. So eventually, I think the company was looking into retranslating again and saying, but sometimes there is more that meets the eye. I think they were aware of that challenge, but it was the legislation in France. Is a law that is law Bouton or Mouton or something. I don't remember exactly, but it's the name of the minister that made it that for anything that is commercial, Anglicisms cannot be there. And that forced the translation to be very unnatural for the video gamers. But I think it's an area, and again, there is going to be lots of people talking about video games that know a lot more than I do. I think it's a mismatch that we are finding, and probably something will need to be done, whether it's with advisory groups that will be able to advise on some of the jargon that is being used, or whether it is by the linguistic testers that will be much more involved in giving more feedback and prominent related to the actual playing. But as I said, it's not really my area of expertise, and it's just my very, very personal and educated opinion here.
Yeah.
Thank you, and thanks for the question.
Give it a big shout out. So if you really want to learn more about game localization and how the language issue are resolved, now we are going to have one of the top-notch researcher joining us next week at the conference, and she will be teaching together with a guru from Blizzard.
Excellent.
Okay.
And she happens to be my colleague at UCL. She is in the next office, Xiaoxun Zhang. So yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, everyone, and to our audiences online and
Thank you. Thank you to you. Thank you.